Hi Tom, this is George Sherritt. I just finished doing your inspection, and so I'm doing a review for you. That's the front of the house. I'll put that on the front of my report. The railings on the front aren't considered a graspable rail. They're a little too wide. There's a nice piece of technical writing in the code that describes what a graspable rail is. You may want to upgrade that, just so, because the idea is if your feet slip, this is too wide and your hand will come off. You have to excuse me, I have braces that are relatively new and I'm talking funny, so it sounds weird to me anyway. The vents are okay. I thought they were shut. They're just louvered, and the ones that are black anyway are fine. There's a bunch of other ones that don't have any screening, but we'll get to that. On the exposed windows and doors, there's no flashing above the windows and doors, so they just caulk the top of it. Caulk will keep water out, but caulk's temporary. Eventually that's going to crack and then water's going to get in there. So it would be better if the exposed windows and doors were flashed. That's the top of the door. You can see they've caulked it across here. On the deck, they did kind of an unusual thing. Normally when you build a deck like this, you would attach a board to the house across here, perpendicular to the joist, and that's called a ledger. And then you'd put metal flashing at the top of that would go up behind the siding and out over the top of the ledger to keep water from getting in there. And that would be treated wood, so it could be out in the weather. And instead they just took these hangers and screwed them to the plywood underneath the siding. So the siding's been removed and then just exposed the plywood. So this is going to be exposed to the weather all during the rainy season, and it's going to rot. So this is really not done correctly. Also, they use screws on all the hangers, which are not approved fasteners for hangers. The state requires home inspectors to call out earth to wood contact. So these are just planter boxes, but they've buried the posts in the ground. Anytime you stick wood in the ground, it's going to shorten its life. There's a bush up against the siding. I'd recommend that be trimmed back so it doesn't hold water against the siding. That's also a pathway for things like carpenter ants. You've got a really nice mini split, or ductless heat pump as they're called. It was operating while we were here today and seems to be working well. That's just some statistics about it. The doorway for the crawl space under the house is just a piece of OSB, so it won't keep animals out. I'd recommend a real cover be made. There's mortar missing, bricks of the chimney in a few places. This chimney's not functional. It could be taken down, or you could repoint it. It doesn't have a cap. Again, it's not functional, but that's going to let rain in there, and it could let bats in there, it could let birds in there. So even, if it's going to stay, even though it's abandoned, I would put a metal cap on it to especially keep the rain out, because masonry is fairly porous and it'll soak up water, and it could start to stain the walls where the chimney comes down into the inside of the house. I don't know why somebody would do this, but these are the pier blocks, concrete pier blocks. They buried them and then surrounded the posts with dirt, so they've essentially buried the posts in the dirt again. So I would remove the dirt to expose them so they have air rather than dirt around them. This was just another picture of the same thing. This exposed plywood that they've screwed these hangers to is not correct. Some of the joists in the deck are used. They just used, what was laying around, it looked like, and this doesn't appear to be treated lumber, so I'd recommend that be corrected. This also does not appear to be treated lumber. The chimney firebox cover is missing. It's an abandoned chimney. It's probably not very significant. Now we're inside. The outlet to the left, far left of the kitchen sink is not GFCI protected, so I'd recommend that be done for safety. The dishwasher drain hooks directly into the sink drain. Normally you see a hose clamp here to make sure it stays secure. But anyway, there's the potential of siphoning dirty sink water back onto your clean dishes here, so we don't do this anymore. This normally goes to what's called an air gap, or an anti-siphon device. That's a little thing that sits up next to the faucet on the right-hand side. So I'd recommend a licensed plumber install an air gap. The stove came with an anti-tipping device. So like when the door is open and there was a pot of soup, say, on the stove top, and someone puts weight on the door, the stove tips up and that pot of soup comes sliding off. So mostly for children, but it's an important safety feature I'd recommend be installed. The electrical panel was permitted in 2015, but there probably wasn't a kitchen there. I actually took this picture and sent it to an electrician that I've worked with a lot, because I know you're not allowed to have anything in front of an electrical panel. It doesn't meet code, so that tells me they did a lot of this work without the benefit of a permit. And it's also a bit of a safety issue for anyone working on it, because you have to lean so far over. You know, if your foot slipped and you stuck your hand out to catch yourself, you'd be putting it right inside the electrical panel. So ideally that should be changed. My electrician said the way to change that would be to remove it and just put the panel on the outside. There's no GFCI in the outlet right above the bathroom sink, so I recommend that be corrected by a licensed electrician. I was thankful for this note. It's sometimes hard to notice things that aren't there, that are supposed to be there. There's no dryer vent cut into the wall yet, and I'm not saying I would not have noticed it, but I was thankful for the little sign. Dryer vent will be installed this week. So it's a work in progress. The little cadet heaters have been abandoned. They don't have power to them because you've got the ductless heat pump, which is much more efficient heat, much less expensive to operate than those. There's your ductless heat pump. And some technical information, just how many BTUs it is, that sort of thing. It'll be in my report. Back in the bedroom, the windows in a bedroom, or a window in a bedroom, is a fire egress, and you need to be able to get out either through the door or through the window, and they're both painted shut, so I'd recommend at least one of those windows be freed up so that it easily opens and closes. That's the little cadet in the living room. It's also been abandoned and has no power. It's not needed. Insulation's missing from a lot of places up in the attic from where they've done some work. You know, they've done some maybe new wiring or whatever, and then they never re-insulated, so you're going to have a lot of cold spots there. Same thing here. Same thing here. Also, the bathroom fan vent, this should be insulated. Obviously, in the winter, this is going to be a really cold piece of metal, and you're drawing warm, moisture-laden air up into a cold metal pipe. It condenses, and then it runs back down, and it can damage or destroy the fan. So I'd recommend this be wrapped with insulation. Same thing up close. So the water heater is in the attic, which isn't a great idea, but it's a small house. I get it. There's no earthquake straps on it. It's just freestanding in the middle of the attic, so I'd recommend somehow that it be supported for earthquake. We're on city water here, so there should be an expansion tank on here. Generally, when you're on city water, there's a check valve or a one-way valve on your supply line, so the water in your home is like in a closed loop, closed system, and then when you heat water, it expands, so it has to have someplace to go, and that's the purpose of an expansion tank. It also helps with what's called water hammer, when you shut the hot water off and the pipes all go boom, boom, boom. It takes care of that. They did put a pan under it, but the pan is intended to have a drain hooked to it, and there's no drain, so the pan would hold about, a half a quart of water before it started coming out the drain. So I'd recommend an extension pipe be put on this and taken to the outside. It could just be taken over to the eaves, and then it would drip down the wall if it ever came into play. Probably never will, but if it came into play here, it's just going to leak into the ceiling. Also, the temperature pressure release valve extension pipe, this right here, needs to go to the outside, because if it ever discharges, it's going to overflow the pan or run out the drain and cause a problem. That's just some information about when it was made and how many gallons it is. This is the vent for the stove fan. It's not permissible to use corrugated metal here. It should be smooth wall metal with metal tape at the seams and not screws. It's a fire safety hazard because that really is going to collect grease. So I'd recommend that be corrected. Here's the drain underneath the hot water heater. You can see it's, doesn't go anywhere. And there's no earthquake straps. I'm about to go under the house here. There's some beetle damage and some wood rot to this little piece of opening here. This was really just, there would have been one on each side of the opening to set a frame in there, and one of them's missing, and this one's in pretty bad shape. So really that could just be removed and then make a new frame out of treated wood. I found a copper line under the house that was used for an oil line. I broke a piece off and smelted it, and it smelled like fuel oil. So at some time there was a fuel oil tank on the property. Usually on a small house like this, they were on a stand. They were more expensive to bury. That tended to happen, in the bigger, nicer homes, like around the South Capitol neighborhood, that kind of thing. But I didn't see any signs of a buried oil tank. It's a possibility. If it's concerning to you, you could call someone like Advanced Environmental and have them come out. They'll come with a metal detector, that sort of thing, and see if they can find a tank. Most likely, it was on a stand and just got removed when they stopped using oil heat. There's wood debris in quite a few places under the house. That's cellulose, so it's considered food for insects, so I'd recommend all the wood scraps be removed. More of the same. Also, the plastic's missing in a bunch of places under the house, so the purpose of the plastic or visqueen is to keep moisture from coming up into the wood structure. Those beetles I showed you earlier like a wood moisture content between 14 and 20%, and if you have good ventilation and good plastic, it'll hover right around 14% and the beetles won't be interested. But if you don't have plastic or don't have good ventilation, those beetles would start to show up. But that was the only place I saw them. The structure's in really great shape actually for its age. More wood scraps, more exposed dirt needs to be covered. The underside of the house has never been insulated, so that would really increase the comfort and the fuel efficiency of heat in the home if you had it insulated. More exposed dirt. This was some old abandoned plumbing that just left down there. There's big piles of wood over here. Same thing here. A lot of the original vents, and these are not the ones that you see from the outside that are black. They just look like this on the outside. None of them have screening, so rodents and animals can come and go freely, so I would recommend they be screened. There's a bunch more wood scraps left under the house. That vent is also open. This vent is open. That's where the ductless heat pump is right there. So pretty much all the ones from the outside that look like this need screening. And then we're back out front. If you have any questions after watching this and reading my report, feel free to give me a call. Thanks.